Christianity it's syncretic, and that does make it, I think, inherently adaptable to other ways. It's a benefit because it's utilizable. It's a drawback because if you try to look too deep into it, it becomes like a tissue paper that you drop into water, and it just winds up dissolving itself and going into 1,000 different directions. So that's my take here. Why are most why are most low scale nationalists of a very unfortunate sort who engage in deplorable activism, fat, angry Slavs, or effeminate? And it is true, I think, because nationalism among the group, the group which Top Tier refers to, he's essentially talking about whites who become involved with various various movements that are not of a good quality. I think it attracts lower quality people, and that leads to very low quality outcomes. So what Top Tier is describing here, the behavioral trend in my mind, is absolutely correct. I think it's just that you have a inherently defective movement that attracts people who are far from optimal.
And traits tend to run together. So, for example, good-looking people with symmetrical looks, they also tend to be above average in intelligence and to be healthier than normal. They tend to be much more socially well adjusted. And so people who have built something out of life, people who have a family, people who have a good job, people who have an esteemed position in their community, people who are esteemed in, say, their educational institution, they are rarely going to risk things for a marginalized form of political expression. So marginalized movements attract marginalized people. Marginalized people, by and large, aren't making it in the real world. Why aren't they making it in the real world? Because by and large, they don't have the skills that enable one to make it in the real world, which is some extroversion rather than being completely introverted and autistic, some ability to get along with other people, agreeableness, being high in conscientiousness. So people with these positive traits of agreeableness, high in conscientiousness, they tend to get married and to build families and to move ahead with careers. And so why would you risk all that to take a movement that is now widely regarded in the popular eye with the Nazi movement? So of course you're only going to get overwhelmingly deformed people associating with a movement that is widely regarded as deformed. Now, of course, I'm speaking in generalizations. There are many impressive people on the dissident right, but generally speaking, this marginalized movement attracts marginalized people. Those people who have something to lose, they're not going to throw it all away on a movement which has demonstrated itself to be overwhelmingly self-destructive and to be largely composed. Its leadership appears to be largely composed of people who cannot sustain relationships. People who make it in the real world, it's not as important to them to be live streaming and podcasting all day and being a thought leader. Instead, they're developing a vaccine for the COVID-19 pandemic. They're developing new financial instruments. They are growing their business. They are moving ahead in the medical profession or in their academic profession. So marginalized movements instead attract people who are on disability, always been on disability. They attract people who've never held a real job. They attract people who are unable to navigate the real world and who spend most of their time online. They attract people who fail in real life and therefore seek out an alternate world, a second world, an alternate form of reality where they can become as wonderful and as important as they imagine that they really should be regarded in the real world. But the real world turns their back on them, so they therefore turn their back on the real world, and this creates a destructive cycle. So the more marginalized people join a movement, then the more marginalized the movement becomes. Everything spirals because you're attracting people to a movement who are unable to sustain relationships. So you see, ever since Trump was elected, the dissident right has poured far more ammunition and firepower on each other than they have on the enemy. So this is the marker of a dysfunctional movement, and dysfunctional movements overwhelmingly only appeal to dysfunctional people. And you can usually tell someone's level of function just by looking at them. just by listening to them. So people who are at ease with themselves, with the world, with other people, with moving through society, you can hear it in the clarity in their voice, the strength in their voice. You can hear their purpose. You can hear their lack of anxiety and fear. It comes through in their voice. You can see in their facial expressions. Someone who's marginalized, they're going to have usually all sorts of weird interfering tension patterns. They're going to move in an awkward way. They're going to have all sorts of weird, hunches of the back or the shoulders. They're not going to be symmetrical. They're frequently not going to be well groomed. And so you can often just spot these things at a glance.